تنطلق بعد أيام أعمال الدورة 73 للجمعية العامة في دورتها الاستثنائية الطارئة لهذا العام، وسوف يشارك وفد كبير من مصر برئاسة السيد عبد الفتاح السيسي رئيس الجمهورية، ويتضمن الوفد عدد كبير من السادة الوزراء وكبار المسؤولين في الدولة. وسوف نلتقي الآن بسعادة السفير محمد إدريس مندوب مصر الدائم لدى الأمم المتحدة. سيادة السفير، أهلا بك معنا.
أهلا بحضرتك والمشاهدين الكرام.
نريد أن نتحدث عن أجندة مصر في الدورة 73 للجمعية العامة، حيث أن مصر ستشارك بوفد كبير رفيع المستوى يرأسه السيد رئيس الجمهورية. يعني ما هي الملامح العامة الأجندة المصرية في هذه الدورة؟
بداية أهلا بكم وبالمشاهدين وبالقراء الأعزاء. طبعا الفترة القادمة هي فترة الازدحام في الأمم المتحدة وفي الجمعية العامة والنشاط المكثف، لكن هذا لا يعني أن نشاط الأمم المتحدة هو فقط في الشق الرفيع المستوى الذي يبدأ مع افتتاح دورة الجمعية العامة، لكن طبعا الأعمال متصلة طول العام، لكن الشق الرفيع المستوى هو الذي يحظى بأكبر قدر من الاهتمام والتركيز والإبراز الإعلامي. بالطبع مصر تشارك في هذه الدورة، وهي أولا أنهت عامين من عضوية مجلس الأمن، حفل بالكثير من القضايا الهامة والنشاط المصري المكثف. تلا ذلك رئاسة مصر لمجموعة 77 والصين خلال هذا العام، وهي أكبر كتلة تفاوضية في الأمم المتحدة، تضم حاليا 134 دولة. ثم تستعد مصر أيضا العام القادم لرئاسة الاتحاد الأفريقي، فهناك انخراط مصري مكثف في القضايا الإقليمية والقضايا الدولية. بالطبع أجندة الأمم المتحدة كما تعلم هي مثلث له 3 أضلاع. ضلع يتعلق بالتنمية المستدامة، ضلع يتعلق بالسلم والأمن وحفظ السلم والأمن، والضلع الثالث يتعلق بالقضايا الإنسانية وحقوق الإنسان. وبالطبع في كل هذه المجالات هناك أولويات مصرية، هناك اهتمامات مصرية، وهناك إسهام مصري في كل هذه المجالات. طبعا ستكون هناك فعاليات رفيعة المستوى عديدة يمكن أن نتحدث عنها لاحقا خلال هذا الشق رفيع المستوى تشارك فيها مصر، سواء من خلال السيد رئيس الجمهورية أو السيد وزير الخارجية أو أعضاء الوفد المصري الذي سيشارك في أعمال الشق رفيع المستوى للدورة 73 للجمعية العامة.
سيادة السفير، بالطبع سيادتك حددت وقلت أن هناك 3 أضلاع للمثلث الخاص بالأجندة المطروحة على الدورة 73، ومنها التنمية. يعني لو نظرنا إلى مسألة التنمية داخل مصر، أين نحن الآن في مسألة التنمية المستدامة وتحقيق الأهداف الإنمائية للألفية والأجندة 2030؟ أين نحن الآن؟
هي طبعا يعني يمكن أفضل في هذا أن أشير إلى التقارير الخاصة بالمؤسسات الأممية والدولية، حتى لا تكون وجهة نظر انطباعية.
صحيح، نحن نريد ماذا يقول الآخرون.
التقارير الخاصة بإدارة الشؤون الاقتصادية والاجتماعية في الأمم المتحدة، لدينا التقارير الخاصة بالمؤسسات الدولية المختلفة. هي تشير إلى أن مصر تتحرك بقوة على طريق الإصلاح الاقتصادي، تشير إلى أن النمو الاقتصادي ارتفع، التضخم انخفض، تشير إلى أنه هناك مشروعات كبيرة يتم تنفيذها، وبالتالي والتصنيف الائتماني لمصر في ازدياد، وبالتالي هي تعطي تقييما إيجابيا للجهود المبذولة. طبعا يجب أن ندرك أن هذا الإصلاح هو طريق طويل، وهذا الإصلاح أيضا له تكلفة. صحيح. وبالطبع بدون شك بلدنا وشعبنا العظيم هو البطل الأساسي لأي إصلاح اقتصادي، لأنه هو الذي يعني ينجز هذا الإصلاح، وهو أيضا الذي يتحمل تكلفة هذا الإصلاح. لكن هذا الإصلاح بالطبع يحقق المصلحة المصرية على المدى المنظور، وهناك الكثير طبعا. هناك أيضا قطاعات حصل فيها تقدم كبير جدا، موضوعات قطاع الطاقة في مصر، قطاع الكهرباء، قطاع الاتصالات، التيسيرات التي تتم لجذب المستثمرين، الاهتمام بتنمية مناطق حيوية استراتيجية مثل سيناء. وهذا أيضا يتصل بالرؤية الشاملة للتعامل مع قضايا الاستقرار والتطرف والإرهاب، أنه التنمية جزء أساسي في تحقيق سلم وتحقيق أمن، سواء على المستوى الوطني أو الإقليمي أو الدولي.
ده صحيح. طيب يمكن لو نظرنا إلى زاوية السلم والأمن الدوليين وهما
peace in the region and the possibility for the peoples concerned to live in safety, security, and in dignity. We all are aware of the fact that the fates of Israeli and Palestinian people are inextricably linked. Neither of the two people will be able to meet their national aspirations to the detriment of the other. 25 years after the Oslo Accords, in the context of a proliferation of regional crises, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains central, it remains serious, and it continues to carry symbolic weight. Hence, the international community cannot turn away from this conflict. In this spirit, our president, the president of the French Republic, Emmanuel Macron, tomorrow in Paris will speak with the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mr. Mahmoud Abbas. It is in the same spirit that our exchanges take place with the Israeli Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu. These are planned next week on the margins of the United Nations General Assembly. France's conviction is that our shared compass, more than ever before, needs to be implementation through negotiations of the two-state solution. This alone will bring about fair and lasting peace between Israel and Palestine. France will spare no effort to achieve this. Thank you.
I thank the representative from France, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you once again to the Special Coordinator for your briefing and for the work you're doing to improve the situation and bring the situation closer to peace, and for all the hard work of your teams on the ground. The United Kingdom is committed and remains committed to achieving a two-state solution, leading to a safe and secure Israel, living alongside a viable and sovereign Palestinian state with Jerusalem as a shared capital. We continue to believe that the best way to achieve this is through negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians, and for all parties to focus on steps that are conducive to peace. As the French ambassador said, some 25 years ago we had the Oslo Accords. It is doubly concerning, therefore, to see the recent developments on the ground on key aspects of Resolution 2334. The level and rhetoric of hatred and dehumanization on all sides is repellent, but it is also dangerous. The UK remains deeply concerned about the Israeli authorities' planned demolition of the village of Khan al-Ahmar. Khan al-Ahmar is located in an area of strategic importance for the contiguity of a Palestinian state, and its demolition threatens a major blow to the prospects for a two-state solution with Jerusalem as a shared capital by paving the way for settlement building in Area E1. The UN has said that demolition could amount to forcible transfer in violation of international humanitarian law. The recent decision of the Israeli Supreme Court does not mandate demolition. Demolition remains at the discretion of the Israeli government. We therefore call on the Israeli government, once again, not to go ahead with its plan to demolish the village, including the school, and displace the residents. I share concerns about the situation of the UN Relief and Works Agency, which is facing severe financial pressure at a time of increased demand. We support a just, fair, agreed and realistic settlement for Palestinian refugees, and until that point, we remain firmly committed to supporting UNRWA and Palestinian refugees across the Middle East. We are concerned about the impact of the recent US decision on funding. We believe UNRWA is a lifeline for millions of Palestinian refugees across the Middle East. We have so far provided ourselves some $67 million to UNRWA, 59 million to its core services, and 7.8 million in humanitarian aid in Syria. We hope this will help meet immediate needs and that programs and services can remain uninterrupted. We call on the international community and other donors to follow this and step up support to UNRWA to ensure its vital services are not interrupted. At the same time, I would like to stress that for UNRWA to have a sustainable future, it needs to continue to promote realistic and technical cost-saving reforms. The United Kingdom will continue to work closely with UNRWA and donors on how best to ensure continuity of essential services to Palestinian refugees at this time. Lastly, and as the French ambassador said, there is an urgent need to address the awful and deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza. The United Kingdom's recently announced a new $49 million program to support economic development in Gaza and in the West Bank. In the West Bank. We've released 2.6 million to UNICEF to help provide up to 1 million Gazans with access to clean water and sanitation, and we have given $2 million to the ICRC appeal to support emergency medical needs. We are supportive of efforts to reduce the conflict in Gaza. It is in everyone's interest for peace and stability to prevail in Israel and in the occupied Palestinian territories. And Special Coordinator, we fully support your efforts to improve the situation in Gaza, and we urge the relevant parties to engage fully with your proposals. We also would like to see progress on humanitarian and economic proposals at the meeting of the Ad Hoc Liaison Committee next week, and we call upon both Israel and the Palestinian Authority to deliver on their outstanding commitments. We reiterate the need for Israel to reduce its movement and access restrictions on the people of Gaza and for Hamas to commit to non-violence and fully end its attacks on Israel. In order to see a long-term improvement in Gaza, momentum around Fatah-Hamas reconciliation needs to be maintained. The United Kingdom is supportive of Egyptian efforts to enable the Palestinian Authority to resume control of Gaza, and we encourage all parties to engage constructively. The recent deaths on both sides of the conflict, including the deaths of 3 Palestinians in Gaza over the past week and the stabbing of an Israeli in a settlement on 16 September, reflect the need for progress to end the cycle of violence. We strongly urge all relevant parties to respect international law, de-escalate tensions, exercise restraint, and prevent incidents that could jeopardize the lives of Palestinians and Israelis. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Благодарю вас, госпожа председатель. Благодарим спецкоординатора Николая Младенова за обстоятельный доклад по положению в ближневосточном урегулировании. Сегодняшнее заседание проходит в знаковые дни для истории.
Today's meeting occurs on a landmark day for the history of the peace process. 40 years ago, the Camp David agreements were arrived at. 25 years ago, the Oslo Accords were struck. These are important components. These, alongside other parameters agreed upon by the international community, have comprised the bedrock of a political process which also was enriched with important UN Security Council resolutions, the Madrid Principles, the Arab Peace Initiative, and the roadmap of the Middle East Quartet of International Mediators on Middle East Settlement. At the heart of this international legal basis is the two-state solution for the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, implementation of which is contingent on the need for agreement to be reached on all final status issues, including Jerusalem, refugees, borders, and security, through direct dialogue between the Israelis and the Palestinian people. Unfortunately, these landmark dates arrived amid troubling developments in Middle East policy. Indicators are increasingly pointing to an aspiration to undermine what has been developed, including with the participation of the United States, namely the platform for a settlement. How else can one regard and view the recent decision taken by Washington on Jerusalem to close the PLO office in the United States Capitol? We genuinely fail to understand the withdrawal of financing for the United Nations Relief Works Agency and the recent refusal to continue to facilitate operations of 2 hospitals in East Jerusalem. Bilateral conflicts have collapsed. Even important security-related cooperation is under threat. Such measures do major damage to collective efforts to arrive at Palestinian and Israeli in a comprehensive settlement in the Middle East. There is still time to rescind the decision taken. We see the response and revision of the current approaches, which have grave consequences for prospects of the peace process, and a return to the roots of settlement. There needs to be an emphasis on rekindling international cooperation in the spirit of Russian-U.S. co-sponsorship, as well as the Madrid process. This naturally led to the establishment of the Middle East Quartet, which, as we see it, is the most effective mechanism, and which was also sponsored by the Security Council, which was approved by the Security Council. It is necessary to revitalize work to launch direct Palestinian-Israeli dialogue. In this connection, what remains relevant is our initiative to organize in Moscow a personal meeting between the Palestinian and Israeli leaders. It is necessary to reverse existing trends, which are a consequence of unilateral decisions. I am referring to cessation of settlement activities of Israel on the occupied territory, inflammatory rhetoric, and violence on the part of both sides. Of course, one cannot overlook humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people, above all in the Gaza Strip. At the same time, we proceed from the premise that robust assistance to Gaza needs to dovetail with rebuilding unity among the Palestinian ranks. We would note the important work carried out by the United Nations, specifically UNRWA, on the occupied Palestinian territories and in refugee camps. We welcome and we support the inclusion of regional players in Middle East settlement. We see and we highly value the role of Egypt and Jordan in Palestinian affairs. Russia's position on Middle East settlement remains and was and remains principled and consistent. We firmly believe that a fair solution to the Palestinian issue is of key significance to remedy the situation throughout the region. Pursuit of the conflict between Israel and Palestine, on the contrary, will constantly poison the overall international atmosphere, will have a detrimental effect on efforts to resolve other regional crises, and will fuel terrorism. We would particularly draw attention to the importance of improvement of relations within the Arab family. We are interested in a united and potent League of Arab States where all disputes are resolved on the basis of mutually respectful dialogue. We advocate revival of multilateral efforts on Middle East issues as a whole. We propose that colleagues thoroughly consider our vision to establish confidence-building measures in the Persian Gulf, which eventually should lead to the establishment of a pan-regional security architecture. This is important not just for the resolution of crises in Syria, Yemen, and Libya, but also to prevent potential conflicts. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation. I now give the floor to the representative of Peru.
Gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam President. We thank you for convening this meeting, and we'd like to thank Mr. Mladenov for his detailed briefing this afternoon, and that has called our attention to the dramatic situation in Gaza. We'd like to stress 3 points which we feel do require our urgent attention. First of all, we need to put an end to the practices of settlement, demolition, and evictions on occupied Palestinian territory. Peru is concerned at the persistence of these practices, which are contrary to international law, which seriously endanger the territorial integrity of the Palestinian state and undermine the possibility to achieve a political solution. We are particularly concerned about the humanitarian impact which would arise from the demolition of a group of structures in the locality of Khan al-Ahmar, which, as was mentioned by Mr. Mladenov, houses a community of 181 Palestinians, more than half of them minors. These practices must cease in strict compliance with Security Council resolutions, and in particular 2334. My second point is that we feel it's important to reverse the deterioration in the humanitarian situation. We are dismayed at the profound and progressive worsening of the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, made worse by recent events of violence and by the cutting of the funding to the assistance programs. In order to overcome this reality, we feel it's indispensable to address the root causes of the problem, particularly the lack of basic services and the lockdown to which millions of Palestinians are subjected, and this is fertile ground for violence and extremism. And in this regard, we welcome the fact that the Special Envoy and his team have been able to identify specific projects in the area of infrastructure and development that could be carried out in Gaza. We also feel it's essential to make progress in the process of intra-Palestinian reconciliation, and the agreement achieved last October under the auspices of Egypt should lead to specific results and actions. We feel that this is what should facilitate the legitimate Palestinian Authority resuming effective control over Gaza, which would promote the resumption of direct negotiations with Israel. We must also reiterate the need to give UNRWA stable and predictable funding, and to this end to mobilize the solidarity of the international community, and in particular that of countries that have the greatest resources and those that are committed to peace and stability in the region. Finally, my third point is that we feel it's important to cease violence and to commit to achieving a political agreement. We regret the fact that the parties continue with their hostile positions. Peru condemns the indiscriminate violence of Hamas and the disproportionate Israeli responses and the rhetoric of confrontation on both sides. We highlight the importance and urgency of having a minimum level of understanding that could help to reverse the negative trends on the ground and help to bring about the resumption of direct negotiations between the parties. All of this with a view to achieving the only viable solution, namely two states living side by side within secure and mutually recognized borders. I'd like to conclude, Madam President, by welcoming the presentation last May in written format of the quarterly report on the implementation of Resolution 2334, which was requested of the Secretary-General by 10 members of this Council. We hope that we will have a new written report in next December, since this will lend greater transparency to our treatment of this delicate issue. Thank you very much.
Thank the representative of Peru, and I now give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I'd like to thank Special Coordinator Mr. Mladinov for his briefing. The question of Palestine is the crux of the Middle East issue. It is the question fundamental to peace in the Middle East. The recent developments in Palestine and Israel are deeply troubling. The prospects for a two-state solution remain elusive, as the resumption of the Palestinian-Israeli peace talks is facing difficulties, and the settlement activities and demolition of Palestinian properties continue unabated. The situation in the Gaza Strip remains tenuous, marred by persistent casualties among Palestinian civilians as a result of violent clashes. The risk of an escalating conflict can hardly be ignored. Given the current dire situation, the international community needs to step up efforts to promote political solution to the Palestinian question. The Security Council in particular should take the lead and set an example. First of all, the international community should uphold the two-state solution, which represents the right way forward to resolve the Palestinian question. The international community should, on the basis of UN resolutions, the principle of land for peace, the Arab Peace Initiative, the roadmap for peace in the Middle East, scale up its political and diplomatic efforts. It is imperative to effectively implement Council resolutions, cease all settlement activities, stop the demolition of Palestinian properties, including the Bedouin village, immediately lift the blockade on the Gaza Strip, and take measures to prevent violence against civilians. Second, the international community should stay united in a concerted effort to promote an early resumption of peace talks between Palestine and Israel. All parties concerned should move toward each other, fully engage in dialogue and consultation, avoid any unilateral action that may lead to deterioration of the situation, so as to create the requisite environment for the resumption of dialogue. The international community should work together to find a viable way forward to break the current stalemate. Those with major influence on the Middle East, in particular, should play a constructive role in this regard. Third, sensitive issues such as the status of Jerusalem should be properly addressed. The issue of Jerusalem's status is complex and delicate. All parties should prioritize peace and tranquility in the region and act with caution to avoid triggering new regional rivalries. All parties should respect historical plurality, uphold fairness and justice, implement international consensus, and strive for peaceful coexistence. Acting upon relevant UN resolutions and international consensus for a negotiated settlement that accommodates the interests of all parties. Madam President, the international community should not forget the over 5 million Palestinian refugees. For more than 6 decades, UNRWA has played an important role in alleviating the sufferings of the Palestinian people and promoting regional peace and stability. The agency is currently faced with many challenges, including a funding deficit. We appreciate the increased contributions from relevant parties to the agency and call upon all parties to provide more and steady support to the agency and to the countries hosting Palestinian refugees in order to ease the pressure in the refugee relief efforts. For the past 30+ years, China has been making financial contributions to the agency on an annual basis. This year, in light of the urgent needs of the agency, we increase our contribution accordingly. China will continue to provide our best possible support to the agency for the discharge of its mandate. China firmly supports the Palestinian people establishing a fully sovereign and independent Palestinian state based on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. We support the greater integration of Palestine into the community of nations. China will continue to play a constructive role in promoting the Middle East peace process in keeping with the 4-point proposal set out by Chinese President Xi Jinping for resolving the Palestinian question. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of China, and I now give the floor to the representative of Sweden.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you very much to Special Coordinator Mladenov for his clear briefing today, and also your reminder about the urgency and volatility of the situation on the ground, and that 25 years since the historic Oslo Accords, we need to have a serious and frank discussion about the obstacles to peace and the threats to the two-state solution, which does represent the international consensus. I want to address 3 elements of Resolution 2334: settlements, violence, and differentiation. The Israeli settlement policy continues unabatedly despite repeated international condemnations. Over the reporting period, the Israeli authorities have announced plans and tenders for thousands of new settlements units in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, while Palestinian homes are being demolished and people are at risk of being forcibly transferred. We second the calls from both the UN and the European Union to the Israeli authorities to reconsider their decision to demolish the Bedouin village of Khan al-Ahmar in Area E1. It would have serious consequences for its residents, a majority of which are children, as well as for the contiguity of the Palestinian state and Palestinian access to East Jerusalem. Israel's settlement policy is illegal under international law, as are actions taken in this context, including the demolitions of Palestinian communities and possible forced transfers of population. This policy undermines prospects for peace and the viability of the two-state solution. We therefore urge the Israeli authorities to reconsider and reverse these policies. We call for steps to prevent acts of violence against civilians, including acts of terrorism, provocation, and destruction. In line with Resolution 2334 and well-established EU policy, we call for the distinction between Israel within pre-1967 borders and occupied territory. As is obvious from the Special Coordinator's briefing today, progress on implementing this part of Resolution 2334 is lacking. We urge all states to act in this regard. Madam President, since our last meeting in August, we welcome that the situation in and around Gaza has stabilized somewhat thanks to international efforts, not least by the Special Coordinator in Egypt. But as we heard, the situation remains tense and fragile, and for the sake of long-term stability, we underline the importance of all relevant parties, including the PLO, taking part in these efforts. While another devastating conflict between Israel and Hamas may have been averted, it is imperative to alleviate the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Interventions with quick, direct, and immediate impact of daily lives are possible and urgently needed for the population in Gaza living under very dire circumstances. We look forward to discussing this in greater detail at the AHLC meeting next week. But let me here underline that it is crucial to see a lifting of the Israeli closure regime, an end to acts of violence and acts of provocation, progress in intra-Palestinian reconciliation, and a return of the Palestinian Authority to Gaza. Madam President, we're all aware that UNRWA plays a critical role on the ground. It provides education, health, and other essential services to Palestine refugees, but it also constitutes a key factor for the stability in the region, including in the neighboring countries, until the final status issue of refugees has been settled. We therefore regret the United States' decision to not provide further funding to UNRWA after decades of political and financial support. The US has traditionally been the largest donor, and its support has been much appreciated. This decision has contributed to a serious financial crisis of UNRWA, with a funding shortfall of currently $186 million. A few weeks ago, UNRWA's schools for more than 500,000 Palestinian children opened. However, the agency's funding beyond September is not secured. The remaining financial gap needs to be filled for schools to remain open. Sweden is among the top donors to UNRWA, and in August we signed a multi-annual partnership agreement worth over $200 million. We are fully committed to supporting UNRWA at this critical juncture, and together with our partners, including Jordan, whose commitment to UNRWA we commend, we have sought to mobilize political and financial support over recent months. We will also use the occasion of the high-level week of the General Assembly to this end, and we call on all countries to step up support, since the shortfall is unprecedented and, as mentioned, risks to spur instability and violent radicalization in both Gaza and the wider region. Madam President, the Oslo Accords did unfortunately not bring the peace that both Israelis and Palestinians deserve. We reaffirm our support for an end to the occupation and the two-state solution based on international law, relevant UN resolutions, and previous agreements. There is simply no viable alternative to the two-state solution, which is the only way the legitimate aspirations of both peoples can be attained. Yet, as we've heard today, it is getting increasingly distant by the day. We therefore need to redouble our collective efforts to salvage the two-state solution. The international community and regional stakeholders have a key role to play in revitalizing meaningful peace negotiations, which require the full participation of women. This Council too has a role to play, as it did when Resolution 2334 was adopted. We often speak in this chamber of how important it is that decisions of this Council are respected. That is why we are gravely concerned by the clear lack of implementation of Resolution 2334, and that is why we were surprised that no Secretary General report was circulated prior to this meeting. We recall that written reports is standard practice in the Council and stipulated by Note 507. In June, a report was circulated in line with the request made by 10 members of this Council. We encourage this practice to continue, and we look forward to receiving a written report for the next quarterly period. I thank you very much, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Sweden, and I now give the floor to the representative of Poland.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, I would like to thank Special Coordinator Nicola Mladenov for his very comprehensive briefing on the implementation of the 2334 resolution. Madam President, 25 years ago, the first Oslo Accord was signed. Despite its many shortcomings, the agreement represented a historic compromise. Unfortunately, since then, the conflict has not seen significant positive moves towards achieving process. On the contrary, we have seen that the recent security situation in Israel and in the occupied Palestinian territory has become more tense. Many times over the last couple of weeks, we have expressed our great concern about the tragic loss of civilian lives on both sides. We have appealed to Israel for the proportionate use of force. We have also called on the Palestinians to stop indiscriminate and deliberate rocket fires from Gaza to Israel, as well as causing fires by launching incendiary kites and balloons. Let me underline once again, all sides must fully comply with their obligations under international humanitarian and human rights law. Recent developments on the ground clearly point out to an urgent need to continue the de-escalation process. We believe that a negotiated two-state solution and resolving all final status issues, including Jerusalem, settlements, the Palestinian refugees, borders, and security arrangements, still remain a realistic way to fulfill the legitimate aspirations of both parties and achieve the long-term peace. We should strengthen cooperation with the countries of the region, especially Egypt and Jordan, which have a real impact on the de-escalation of tensions in the Israeli-Palestinian relations. We appeal to both sides to refrain from unilateral steps that prejudge the outcome of final status negotiations and expect them to demonstrate through their actions and policies their commitment to peace.